Hi, everyone. This is Abe, and you're on the NYC Taxi News Podcast. I'm here. Carolyn is here. Dowd is here, and we are honored to have Nancy Nancy here. Okay, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things today. Okay, and I have a little list I'm going to read off, and hopefully we can get to it all. And we might add some other things to it. The first thing I want to talk about is driverless taxis, and then we want to talk about taxi hustlers, and we'll get get to that in a little while. The lawsuit that was won recently for drivers that were screwed of their licenses and not able to make any money for a number of years, and they will be compensated. Okay, and the upcoming mayoral election, we're going to talk a little bit about. And Carolyn has a couple of things she wants to say about the Honorable Meera Joshi. Okay.
Ready? Okay, thanks, Abe.
Let's start
As
with
usual,
let's start with the driverless taxis.
it's all about the money. The latest trip numbers contain a few surprises. I looked at June, which was the last complete set of numbers covering all the sectors, and comparing June 24 to June 25, the total trips per day increased by 5%, from 838,000 a day to 880,000 a day. Trips for yellow are up 22%. Some of that is probably because Uber is dispatching to yellow. Black cars are up 37%, and this is the thing that really surprised me. Livery trips are up 67% comparing last year to this June. Uber and Lyft down a little, 1%. Plus, of course, whatever trips, which we're going to discuss, that are done illegally at the airports, cruise piers, and hotels. Some of the guys have ghost plates, which the city is now attempting to remedy. Evidently, according to Gail Brewer, who's a city council person from the Upper West Side, she said that something like 30% of the cars that you see around with foreign plates, meaning like Florida, Texas, etc., don't belong to that car, which is interesting. In my opinion, deterrence would go a long way to fix this problem, because after it occurs, when you try to remedy it, it becomes a very lengthy process and often challenged in the courts. What else? In a settlement of a lawsuit that was first brought 20 years ago by Dan Ackman, who we've had on the show, nearly 20,000 former and current New York City cab drivers whose licenses were suspended after an arrest could receive as much as $140 million from the city because taxi regulators did not provide them a meaningful way to appeal the suspension. As I guess we all know, if you were accused of something, they would just take your license away from you and you would lose your livelihood. And that was changed in 2020. The judges have discretion. They're supposed to take into account, whether you're going to be violent and pose a danger to society. But there were a number of people, maybe 20,000 people, whose licenses were taken away and they lost a lot of money. According to what I read in the Times, you can get up to $36,000 less legal fees, which I don't know how much that is. But get in touch with the TLC if you think you might be eligible for this. What else? The New York City Transportation Committee is having a hearing on September 15th. General oversight of the for-hire industry. They're also going to consider making commercial parking spaces available to for-hire vehicles, but not taxis. We're also going to consider adding 2 additional commissioners to the TLC, both being TLC licensed drivers. The TLC is having a hearing on the 3rd of September regarding lowering personal injury protection insurance on TLC licensed vehicles from $200,000 to $50,000, which would save drivers a few $100 a year. They're also proposing new pay rates for high volume for hire service drivers. Waymo is now testing and gathering data on self-driving vehicles in Brooklyn and Manhattan. So I guess we'll get into that. And in case you missed it, there's a 2021 report on autonomous vehicles from Sarah Kaufman of the Rudin Center at NYU, which suggests a separate type of medallion for autonomous taxis. Sarah Kaufman's the head of the Rudin Center for Transportation and Policy and is also a TLC commissioner. Meera Joshi, who seems to have just a fascination with death, who's now landed at Greenwood Cemetery as president, was parked at Rudin as a visiting scholar for a while in between gigs. She's also on the board of Marblegate, who's the largest holder of medallions in New York City, which is interesting. She was also on the board of the MTA, but I think she removed herself from that. But she is still on the board of Marblegate. And by the way, the Rudin Center, Sarah Kaufman, who wrote this report on autonomous vehicles, is president, has donors, but they do not disclose who the donors are. I think that's also of interest. In other words, getting back to the medallion that they discussed in the report, the medallion that you bought, Abe, from New York City, assuming that you had exclusive rights to on-demand fares, that you worked 16 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week to pay off your loan, this would not be that medallion. This would be a new, distinct, special medallion. So we'll have to see how that develops.
Well.
Oh, wait, let me just finish. Let's just finish. Amid all the uncertainty we're facing, New York City is having a mayoral and city council election in November. The leading candidate, Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani's claim to fame is standing with hunger-striking medallion owners, advocating for the medallion relief plan, among for other things like free buses, government-run grocery stores, and defunding the police. Although he seems to be walking that back a little now, but we'll have to see. Ex-Crazy Eddie accountant Sam Antar, who cooked Crazy Eddie's books and knows a thing or two about untangling complicated financial pathways, has analyzed Mamdani's campaign finances and concluded that the money being channeled through nonprofits like the Democratic Socialists, funded by George Soros. In other words, he's not getting small donations, and made to a populist candidate, but large amounts of money from a very powerful oligarch who has his own agenda. The other candidates are Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, and Republican Curtis Sliwa. And in case you're wondering, how does this happen? How did Mamdani become the leading candidate expected to win the election in November? Somebody came out with an interesting analysis. Her name is Michelle Tandler. She's on X. And her argument is that most of New York City is dependent on the government one way or another. There's 8.5 million people of us living here. 300,000 people work for the city. Another 300,000 work for the state or the feds. And 600,000 work for nonprofits, which are funded by the government. Plus, half the city is on Medicaid. Half of the renters are in rent-controlled, stabilized, subsidized or public housing. So, in other words, a lot of New Yorkers have a stake in more subsidies, which, ultimately benefit corporations who can pay less in wages because the taxpayers make up the difference. So lots going on, Abe. So what should we do about illegal hails or autonomous driving?
Well, hold on a minute. Hold on. You see, let's just go one thing at a time here. First of all, the thing that got me was the parking for the FHVs, but not for the yellows. So does that mean that when they park and go into a place to go to the bathroom, that I could go on the street next to their car?
I didn't think of that. Yeah, I guess so.
Well, that's exactly what I might do. Okay. Yeah. Fortunately, I'm not driving anymore in New York City, but I could, when it came time for me to go to the bathroom, after complaining for years and years and years, I knew every street in the city where I could go pee and nobody cares. All right. This bothers me like you can't believe. Okay. Because I
brought this up with Justin Brannon, who's the sponsor of the bill to allow Uber to park in commercial parking spots. And he said, "Oh, well, you have your own parking in, taxi stands and taxi
Not
rank
enough.
stands."
Not
And
enough.
but it's also not true, because when I'm walking by them, I look to see who's parked in them, and very often it's not yellow cabs. It's
Right.
all kinds of other cars.
Right.
So nobody's enforcing that.
Well, if you're listening out there, whoever wants to do all these things, you have to find a way for all cars in the city, not even taxis or other vehicles, FHVs and stuff. Any vehicle needs a bathroom immediately. Any vehicle needs a place. Okay. And, the thing is that, they don't care. They're in their office and they can pee anytime they want. All right. And that, and that's what everybody's been saying. This problem will never be cured. All right. I hate to say that, but I can't see how they could possibly cure it. I suggested to the TLC that they, where the parking meters are, okay, that every other block there would be one spot for a taxi, and the taxis would be more than happy to pay whatever the price is to park there. Okay. And that's the best solution I came up with. Nobody listened to me. I told Mr. Alan Fromberg this, and he said, and he did, he sort of understood what I said. This is like 40 years ago, okay? And it took 40 years for them to talk about it now. All right? That's what I got to say. All right?
Well, I guess
Now,
autonomous vehicles don't need to go to the bathroom. How about that?
Yeah.
well,
Exactly.
well, then I'll go in hail an autonomous vehicle.
No, well, in all seriousness, I think with that surprises me that why is it just for FHV, not taxis? I guess they'll argue the taxi stand and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think like there's something that I thought always should have been allowed for yellow cabs, which is the bus lane access, because that's what they do in London,
course.
for example, where
Of course.
the black
Yes.
cabs can go on the bus lane. So I think that would be especially given the street hail nature of yellow cabs. I feel like them using bus lanes should be pretty uncontroversial. But I guess maybe if they're stopping and going, I guess they can't pick up in a bus lane, but
No, you know what?
drive.
There's hardly any buses. If you stand on a corner and you watch the traffic in a bus lane, what are you going to see? You're going to see 100 bicycles and maybe one bus. So allowing yellow taxis to use the bus lanes might keep some of the bicyclists out of the bus lanes, which would be a good thing. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a bicycle like in front of a bus, and the bus is just crawling along because he can't get by the bicycle.
Yep.
But, their plan is to redesign everything. Yeah, you're not going to have autonomous vehicles in the kind of chaos that we have now. That's not going to work. They're going to redesign everything.
That's actually Carolyn, that's a super, if we go to AVs, if that's what we're going right now, what Carolyn is saying is a very missed discussion point in this whole thing, where people think about autonomous vehicles in New York City with the current streetscape.
Yeah.
But if you actually change the design of the streets, it actually makes the discussion, it makes the reality a little bit different. But I don't know where you want to lead this with driverless cars first.
Driverless cars, look, it's a good idea, not for the drivers, okay, because the drivers are going to be out of work, okay, all right, but what was I going to say? Autonomous vehicles, and medallions, we don't need a special medallion. We need the autonomous vehicle.
But by the way, I think on the medallion, Carolyn, you said that I think yes, Sarah Kaufman wrote that in 2021, and that is, in my opinion, ridiculous to create a different class of license when you already have an existing regime. The fact that Meera Joshi is on the board of Marblegate, my guess is that Marblegate is going to use all of their power. I mean, there's 600 million, as Andrew Milgram said on his podcast, there's $600 million into their bet on tax medallions. And if she joined the board, my guess is the thinking around that's changed. And I believe there's already a state Senate bill that requires the existing taxi medallion regime to be used for autonomous vehicles in cities in New York State that are above 1 million people, i.e., only the 5 boroughs.
Well, no, it said that cities above whatever it is, 1 million people, can make their own rules for
But it
autonomous
must have
vehicles.
a medallion. I think it's in there that it must have a taxi medallion.
Really, that wasn't the version. There's usually more than one version of these bills, and the version I read did not say that. But there was a bill in New York City in the council that was again sponsored by Justin Brannan, I think.
Oh yeah, back in 2021. I know you're talking about.
Yeah, current medallion owners should get first crack at any type of medallion or permit or whatever to operate an autonomous vehicle. But that bill never went anywhere. Do you know the New York State bill number?
Yes. Give me 1 second. Let me.
So I read it the other day, and I didn't see anything about that.
I posted it on NYC Taxi News. Okay,
The New York State bill about
I'll read. I've pulled it up.
It's on the home page on the left side.
It's Senate Bill. It's Senate Bill S2688. And
2688. S like Frank?
No, SS Sam, like Sam. Sam.
Oh, Sam. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sam 2688. And
okay.
It says here, not to read the entire bill, but it says, provides that no autonomous vehicle may be used for taxi, livery, or transportation network company, which really is a TNC, which applies to outside of New York City, in any city without a population of 1 million or more, without first being licensed by the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, requires New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission to establish a license for use of autonomous as a taxi cab to promulgate the rules, la 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 la. And within the bill, I gotta look at the latest version. But I believe just think about it logically. If Meera Joshi sits on the board of Marblegate, and a big reason probably why Andrew Milgram wanted her on the board of Marblegate, given her expertise, given she's a former chair of the TLC, is to lobby for this exact thing, for the existing taxi medallion to be an AV license.
Wait. According to what you just read, it was to establish something that would allow a taxi to operate autonomously. That means it's not already established. That means a new thing.
Well, the good news is that she's working with Marblegate, who owns several thousand.
Here it is. So in that bill, if you open up the PDF, Carolyn, this is why the state Senate doesn't do a good job in their summaries. They've added new language, and this is what I talk about the tax medallion. If you go to that bill, section 1, 3, section 1, 3 of that bill, it says, before licensing an autonomous vehicle as a taxi cab, the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission shall establish a license for the use of an autonomous vehicle as a taxi cab and shall promulgate rules regarding such license and operation of autonomous taxi cabs. In promulgating such rules, the NYC TLC at a minimum set requirements for the following. This is where it is. So section 3, subsection B, the process for licensing, issuing a license to use an autonomous vehicle as a taxi cab. B, the issuance of such licenses only to owners of taxi cab medallions.
Oh, this is new language.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, but you have to just figure that if Marblegate, and Marblegate, I think, full disclosure, I think Marblegate's an interesting stock. I think the medallion is an interesting kind of investment right now. No, that's not financial advice, and I've said that for many, many podcasts. The fact that she's on the board of Marblegate indicates to me that Andrew Milgram, and even said this on his podcast he did with Invest Like the Best, he's not against AVs. He thinks that the medallion will convert into a capital asset that can be contributed, And my guess is Meera Joshi might become the best friend of existing taxi medallion owners in this new paradigm.
I just want to say one sentence. This is a person that wants to be on the side that's winning.
That's a good way to think about it. That is actually
That's
a good
a
way to
good
think
point,
about
Dave.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, this is all new
and-
language. The
and-
taxi
and-
industry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to say if she somehow could get the taxi medallions back on their feet, somewhere near it was before, I'll take back everything bad I've ever said about her.
But don't you guys agree? And Nancy, like it'd be
Yes,
good to-
yes, yes. This is new language. That I did not see it in the previous version of the bill that I read, and that's very good. There is hope.
But if she's on the board of Marblegate, of course she's going to go to bat for the medallion industry at this point. She's like 150% invested in this now. And so
You know, I was reading Marblegate's financial statements. There's somebody that's supposed to get 6 medallions a year who's working with Marblegate. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I did an article on it.
I wonder who that could be.
Yeah, so in the article that I did, it's Team Systems. So there's a medallion garage. I think they fell out with their old medallion owners, which a lot of people thought was QML. So they've teamed up with Team Systems as a tax medallion consultant. They're even opening up 2 new of those taxi clubhouses or whatever they're called. You know, they have one in Chelsea. So they're
Yeah.
2 more. And Team Systems seems to be the one they're using. And for their consultancy services, Team Systems or whoever the consultant is going to earn their compensation as 6 taxi medallions, basically.
Yeah, I saw that.
Compensated on top of the 100,000 or whatever they paid a month.
Right.
The places that you mentioned, you know, the Marblegate, good, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to say that I'm approaching my 78th birthday, and I can't remember words. Okay, but the the places that Marblegate has for the drivers, I can remember that. Okay.
Well, when's your birthday, number 1?
January.
Okay.
The place that the recreation place that Marblegate has been doing and wants to do more is great. Okay, but the problem I always found when I needed a place like a toilet where I didn't want to pee in the street, okay, is
well, that kind of relates to that point, Abe.
I know. But what I'm saying is that the biggest problem was not that you couldn't find a place to go to the bathroom. You just couldn't find a place to park your car.
But in front of these clubhouses, at least the one in Chelsea, I believe they have a taxi stand right in front of it or right to the side of it.
But they need more than a taxi stand. They need a garage.
Yes, with 100%, with time. I think the new one in Carolyn, or Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, where Team Systems is in I forget exact I think it's in LIC maybe. I think it's like a proper garage. I think it's like a entire
right. If there's room for like 20 cars, 30 cars, 40 cars, okay, like the at the GFK place, you know, where you wait for fares, and they have like 200 cars at a time, you know, in the lot. That's what you need. You need a you know, and it's property that's very valuable, and that's why you don't get it. Okay, because you know, unless if you're going to pay a big part of money to go park, they're going to build something that's going to make money.
Well, I think I think those garages are like, well, Nancy, just we're kind of not even letting. How did they do it for the green cab industry, by the way? Like, was there a bathroom problem with the green cab industry?
I just like Abe, I spoke a lot about it for many years, and the truth has to be said. A lot of drivers, the majority, well, I don't know how the numbers are looking now in gender, if it's more men or women or they're equal. But when I was there, the majority were men, and a lot of the men, they pee in bottles. I don't know if it's a driver thing, but if for a woman, it was hard. I would never be able to find the bathroom anywhere, and I was consistently always complaining to TLC. Like, I'm a woman, we need more restrooms. And they were saying that, they were trying to take it into consideration, that it was in talks about it, but nothing even happened. And I recall one time, like, I got in a big traffic jam trying to leave some passengers off in, I believe it was by Canal Street. It was so bad, so bad. And I was trying to leave some passengers, and then I felt the urge that I needed the bathroom. So I dropped these women off, and I'm like down there, and I'm like, where do I go? Where do I use the bathroom? With this traffic up and down, I won't make it uptown. Where am I going to go? So I decided to go to one street. I don't know what street it was. It was like close to the courts, close to Chinatown. And I parked there, but I saw the sign. I admit the sign said it was only like for the court officers, I think, court employees. And I saw a little restaurant. And I said, I am taking a chance. Either I get the ticket or I don't, but I cannot hold it no more. So I leave the car and I run to the restaurant, which also, the guy said I couldn't use it. I was not a customer. So I walked around the corner and was able to find something. But when I came back, I had a ticket. And I tried to fight that ticket with their oath online. And it was interesting because I said, that I'm a green taxi driver and that I was a woman and I had been stuck in traffic for a long time and I needed a restroom. And I practically begged the judge, like, please let me go on it as a human thing. And she said no, and it was a woman. She said no. She made me pay my whole fine. That's an interesting story.
Some things never change.
It's really funny, I find, with the city and these tickets, that with tickets and collecting money, the city is as efficient as Tesla is. When it comes to tickets and collecting money, they are like 8+ people. But Nancy, on that, like Abe had some ideas. If you were, let's say you became a commissioner, they're looking for 2 board commissioners on the city council, drivers. How would you solve this issue? Like, what are ideas to solve it? I know, like, I'm curious because I myself have ideas, but I'm not sure if they're good.
I mean, the ideas, they're great. I could have so many ideas. Let's say if it was me. And carrying it out, I don't know how possible it would be. And then the third one, which really Carolyn mentioned it when we started the show, was the enforcement about it. Because look, even like New York Presbyterian Hospital by Morgan Stanley on Broadway, 168, 167. Before I left the industry, there was like a taxi stand there, somewhere around there, that was usually not used. And it was usually taken by SHVs. Now, it's like, I don't think I see it there no more. And whenever it wasn't used by FHVs, it was actually taken by a vendor who had a food truck. So I'm saying, if you're going to try to fight for these things and actually even being able to get them, where's the enforcement? Because I just see, like, I don't know if it's me, but what I see lately in society in New York City is like a sense of entitlement. Like everybody feels entitled to do what they want, not respect the rules. Oh, this is for taxis, but I don't care. I'm going to park here. Regardless, I don't care. It could be an FHV. It could just be a regular car, and that worries me. I would try to fight maybe like to have like a 1 or 2 spots available, maybe not on each block in New York City, but maybe every 5-10 blocks. That would be strictly for driver, maybe 10 minutes to have bathroom use or eating. But then again, who's going to enforce it? Like, will it be enforced? Will a driver get there and try to use
Well,
the restroom or have lunch and
N-
might not find like
Nancy,
a commercial vehicle parked there.
Nancy, how much does it cost to park a car in Midtown Manhattan at a parking meter for 1 hour or a half hour?
I wouldn't really know the price in Midtown. My mother lives on 90th in Columbus, and I went on a Saturday to visit her, and I decided to drive, which was kind of dumb. I had some bags and stuff. I usually take the train to her house. It's 25 minutes. And I drove, and I thought meters would be easy. I did find a meter, and they wanted, wow, they were charging me for 1 hour. They were charging me like $6. And that was just 90th. So
Well,
I
they should.
think that to go further down, it's probably more than meters.
Well, I would say that I would ask that they do as many blocks as they can, every other block, okay, and bring the price down, because you're not gonna be in the spot more than 15 minutes,
Yeah.
okay, right? And make it $2. All right. And then another car will pull in $2. Another car will pull in $2. So 4 times in an hour, that's $8.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They can make more money helping us than not helping us.
And I agree, Abe. I agree, definitely. And it's a good idea, and it could be pulled through. But the other side is also they need to, enforce it. Because I see this like every single day, how people just park where they're not supposed to, and you walk by and maybe once or
Ye-
twice, and there's no tickets, no nothing. There's like no enforcement. So, yeah.
I want to say one more thing, okay? One of the reasons I stopped driving, okay, after 42 years and being one of the greatest taxi drivers in the world, okay? I mean, I got so many compliments from my passengers. I could write a book on that. All right.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? See, I
Was it
forget.
related to the bathroom that you couldn't use access to bathrooms? That's why you quit?
Yeah, right. But no, you're right. Well, no, what I was going to say is I'm a diabetic. Okay. I did became a diabetic and maybe on my 50th birthday. It was and he probably before that, okay, because one of the symptoms of diabetes is you're running to the bathroom to pee twice an hour sometimes, okay, and
Yeah.
it got to the point where I said I can't do this anymore, okay, and I stopped driving, okay. I mean, I had reached a point. I was 65 when I stopped driving. All right. But I knew that at that point, I knew that I could not put up with this anymore.
Hey,
Okay.
can I ask you a few on
Yeah.
that? If there was a bathroom network, would you have continued driving? Was that like the main driver of you quitting?
I would feel more comfortable in all the years that I was driving. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers my questions. I mean, I think what's going to be, I'm going to kind of blend what we're talking about with autonomous vehicles. Actually, and this is the connection I'm going to make, is that in the future, when there are AVs, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years from now, they're actually going to have to figure out a depots within the city for the AVs to, if they're running 24/7, they're going to get, a tire's still going to get flat. AVs aren't going to solve for that. Weather's still going to happen. So they're going to have to figure out like garage depot networks to kind of facilitate the constant maintenance of those AVs. And I think what would be nice, how I'm relating this to driver facilities, they should create that network for drivers. And if they create that network for drivers, those depots, and maybe that's what Marblegate is trying to do with the taxi clubhouses, they kind of set that up for the AV world. So there's a benefit to those companies, those garages. I think a big problem with the medallion industry right now is there's just a tremendous amount of underinvestment over the last 10, since the Medallion crash. And Marblegate is doing this, what I call catch-up CapEx, where they're making these clubhouses, they're making better facilities, they're treating drivers. Yes, there's money to be made, no doubt about it. They have a gigantic bet on, but they, I think, have the right mentality where at least they're producing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You know,
I saw the interview that you posted, I think on your Twitter with Andrew Milgram, and he said, the taxi industry bigwigs were extractive for many, many years. And when he asked the question of the taxi garages, who are your customers, they would answer the passengers. And his argument was, no, your customer is the drivers. And what happened when Uber first came to town is you were losing drivers left and right, and that was your problem because you've been mistreating drivers for all these years, which is true. But to my mind, working for a taxi garage as a fleet driver was sort of the stepping stone to the next step, which was, being a Dove driver, to the next step, which was buying a Medallion, which was your future. But that's a whole other issue. Can I just say one other thing about the autonomous taxi bill before we go on to another topic? This bill, Senate Bill 2688, has not passed. It is in committee, so we don't know what will happen. It was sponsored by Brad Hoylman, and there is contradictory language because in the first description, purpose, a general idea of bill, it says this legislation would require any autonomous vehicle used for taxis or prearranged trips to be licensed by the TLC as a taxi. Well, that's an interesting issue because no one, according to the TLC rulebook and I think the administrative code, is allowed to call themselves a taxi unless you're yellow and you have a medallion. So, because then in the next section, it says, it adds this new section 398 to require all autonomous vehicles used for ride-hail, prearranged trips, or taxis to be licensed by the TLC. The TLC shall establish rules for the issuance of such licenses to taxi medallion owners. So the language is very, very unclear.
Well,
but
yeah,
I think I see where they're going with this.
the language is unclear, but I'll
Very
game it out I'll game it out like this. Although I think the Medallion one is more solid, the Medallion section of it. But you're right, it's like a very initial first draft. Right now, there's a gigantic battle for the soul and the money of the New York City taxi industry, for hire vehicle industry, which is worth billions of dollars. And that battle is between Waymo, Tesla, huge corporations that will lobby for them to fall under a new licensing regime. Because they don't want to buy medallions, they don't want to buy plates. Although for them, at the end of the day, if they're forced to, they will. It's not that much money for them, but they want a new regime. And on the other side of the battle, obviously this can be multifaceted, is taxi medallion owners, but also TLC plate owners. And a lot of TLC plates are claimed by individual drivers. All those 100,000 FHVs are, 70% of them are drivers, driver claim, the individual driver has claim to the TLC plate. And so they're willing to get disintermediated. But just like Milgram said, they're willing to do that, but their plate has to turn into a capital asset. They're willing for a robot to replace them, but the robot company, the company that uses, has to use their TLC plate or their taxi medallion.
Right, so you lost me there because there's a false equivalence between somebody who paid $1 million to buy a permit to pick up passengers in the street on demand and somebody who bought a car. I mean, there's no comparison.
There's no equivalent. I'll go a step further. There's no equivalent. There's no equivalent. No. So, but what I'm saying is that it's not so much like equivalent, fair, like it's almost like this is where we're at today kind of thing is what I'm saying is we have 100,000 plus for hire and then there's green cab drivers, by the way, as Nancy knows, who have been decimated. But so you have these TLC vehicle licenses, and the Medallion is the prestige license, which costs, more than $100,000 now, used to cost $1 million. When people quote that million, it was $1 million for a fraction of its history. For the most part of its history, it was, 50, 100, 150, like obviously inflation adjusted. The million was kind of crazy town valuation. So I don't think that's the right benchmark to use, but 100%, if someone bought a medallion, that's different than someone buying a car, getting a TLC plate. And that's including myself. When I started my fleet, there was not even a concept of the TLC plate has any value. It was more like, that's how I start a rental company. But what I'm just saying is that you have these, you're almost just like calling the game. The game as it stands today is that there's these mega rental companies that have a lot of money on the line. There's Marblegate and taxi medallion owners that have a lot of money on the line. There's a Venn diagram where both of them could combine forces and benefit. And obviously, if the what the taxi medallion industry has to figure out is, are we going to demonize the TLC plate owners? Because if the TLC plate guys are demonized.
Wait. I have a solution. If you have a yellow taxi medallion, then you're eligible to do the AV thing. No extra charge. You already paid your dues for many years. Okay? Yep. Second part of this is, if you're an existing, for a long time, say, black car license, high volume for service, one of those licenses, green cab license, you are eligible to participate in this new AV scheme, but you are going to have to pay into this. Price to be determined later.
I think that's a very reasonable solution. The other thing you can approach this with, and I still believe this to this day, taxi medallions have more rights than TLC plates. I think that equivalent.
That's what I'm saying.
But even as we speak today, so it's still 10-15% of the market is street hails. So taxi medallions still have the monopoly on the street hails. Like people wait. On the airports, the last couple times I've been to the airports, I've just taken a yellow cab, because now Uber and Lyft they're in like a garage that you got to go by AirTran and everything. So the medallion has a clear advantage in the airport. But I'm saying they can pick up at the curbside. But I'm saying that's earned, to your point, Carolyn. They paid like the medallion owners paid money for those exclusive rights. Now, some of what I call medallion maximalists, I think some of the medallion maximalists, I think they are like, all TLC plates should be eliminated. The only thing I say to that is there's 100,000 plus people who have that asset now. I had someone on my podcast, Frank Haley, who he's like an individual driver, owns the TLC plate, and he was saying on the podcast that he views that as a contract between him and the city. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we know what these contracts are worth between us and the city, at least for the last 10 years, almost nothing.
But right now, what I think where the TLC plate guys, including myself, have to get on board with is the medallion has to have more rights, because they paid for those rights, whether that's even tax rights. By the way, the medallion doesn't pay sales tax, so they they can charge a lower fare structurally with that. And I'm totally fine with that. I just think that the worst thing that could happen at this juncture is for TLC plate and medallions to go head to head, because Tesla and Waymo will use that chaos to create a new licensing regime, and everybody loses.
Nancy.
Yes.
I want to ask you.
Yes.
How many green cars that would be needed to work and in all the boroughs and the Bronx and uptown Manhattan, above 125th Street. Okay, how is there a way that they should be able to figure out how many cars are needed and not just give out a zillion cars to anybody that wants one?
You mean with the green cabs?
Well, the thing that failed the green cabs is that they wanted to make all of the livery cars that are roaming the streets and picking up street hails in those areas in the Bronx, in above 125th Street, portions of Queens, most of Brooklyn. Okay, I mean they well outnumber the yellows, but they're doing the same things that the yellows do, even though it's against the law, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to go green because they said, why should we?
Yeah. Well, I will call it the green card, the green card defense. Look, I don't know right now when it comes to numbers. Maybe Caroline can tell me in a bit, or she has the information. I inquired with TLC about 3 months ago. I had a conversation with somebody there. The permit that I was driving is actually owned by my husband. He's the original buyer. And there was like two parts in TLC. Either you give it in to them, like, here, take it back, I don't want it, do whatever you want with it. And then there's the part that's storage. So our permit is in storage. I inquired about it because I had not heard about it since we put it in. And they told me it's fine, it's in storage. Because I was worried with that other little plan they came around with 2 years ago? Caroline, somebody correct me, any of you?
Yeah,
Where
it's
they-
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about-
where they were going to
permit-
put the green cabs back on the road.
Yeah, I
the
guess
person who owns
those
the
are
permit
the-
wanted, but they would be painted
Yeah.
black.
Yeah, it's called,
Yeah,
it was called
those are
the
the
SHL
permits.
pilot. Yeah.
Yeah, that pilot, I see it roaming around a lot in the Bronx. and
Yeah,
some
I've
cars
seen it.
in the Heights. Those cars, I don't know how they work. They're on livery, supposedly on livery cabs, but I see them picking up on the street. So I don't know how that goes. With that saying, with the green cabs, yeah, they came to do a job like the yellow cab, but uptown and other boroughs, but people were not adapting to it. People didn't like it. They always had this thing in their heads that these communities, that yellow cabs are those meters, like the yellow cabs. They're running and they're
Yeah.
running, and anything the driver does is always on purpose. So they can make. I'm not gonna say that in the beginning, it was very new, and I did see a lot of cases where drivers were doing a lot of crazy things on purpose to make that meter run more. And we did see cases like that. But on the other hand, I think that when you looked at it in a perspective, many times these cars actually charge less than if you jumped in the livery cab. If I would stand in front of Target, let's say Target 225th, and the person's only going up the hill with their bags, let's say University in Kingsbridge, they were probably seeing like under $5 ride versus one of those gypsy cabs that charged them $8 or $10. So I'm saying it wasn't a good thing with these communities that are so used to hailing on the street anybody that stops and has a black cab, and they had like bad wording. And of course, if I could go back, I can write a book like Abe about my experiences and all the crazy things I heard that was said about the green cabs by the community, by livery cabs who didn't want them to, to prospect. And of course, in that vein, I was an advocate for them, and I made myself, tons of drivers became my enemies in that industry. On the other side, we had programs, we had some like what we call podcasts now, but we had like little radio stations where we would talk about it in associations, trying to appeal and tell them what the green cab was. And it was just crazy. And then with the runarounds with TLC and everything, right now at this point, I don't think a lot of people will actually be getting SHL permits and invest all that money to go green and hack up the vehicle with everything it needs, because it probably, I don't think it might make sense. I don't know. But I don't know. I've been out of the industry 3 years. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it could go well. It could not. But when I left it, I felt like the numbers had gone down so much. Like I said, the person at TLC at that moment couldn't give me the exact numbers of how many SHLs are still out there working. Maybe
329 per day.
329 are active.
Well, 583 have current licenses. They could be out there according to the TLC, but 329 are out there daily.
Wow, that's a big drop in 3 years since I left. Okay. Woo, oh my God. Oh, that hits my soul. Oh my God.
I think the way to like, and what Nancy's saying, I think the way this industry is going is you have taxi medallions and you have licensed FHVs. I think the green, the paratransit, the this, the that, I think all of it needs to be collapsed into basically two big licensing. That's how people have to think about it.
I think it should be one.
But you don't want that for the medallion industry, though.
No, I want
the
medallion. The people with the medallions already paid, and they're sneaking into the medallion territory.
But when you say people, what the medallion industry paid for, right, was when the street you don't need me to tell you the history, you lived it, but the medallion, in my opinion,
well, the language was unclear. And the TLC used to say the opposite, that an e-hail is a hail, and the two are exactly the same, meaning that was our right. And then it all changed when Uber came to town.
And I think you're hitting.
So it depends who you asked and when you asked. There were even some judges that agreed on this. So it's sort of a gray area.
And Carolyn, you're hitting the nail on the head. The thing I'm saying right now is the industry cannot fall for the same civil war that happened during the medallion times, because Waymo and Tesla and companies like that, if they create a civil war between medallion owners, between other FHV license owners, and I'm not just saying medallions have to capitulate, but the license holders have to be much more, like they have to talk to one another and negotiate about where they want to see the future. Because if they start fighting with each other, 100% a company like Waymo or Tesla will take advantage. Dare I say, they might even promote such fighting so they can eliminate all the licenses, including the medallion. So that's my only point, is like, I think the lesson that was learned from Uber is Uber threw a lot of lobbying money, all of that stuff. And you're right, like the e-hail, it could have been 100%, no disagreement there. This time around, if that same sort of fight happens, they might want that to occur. So then they create their own new license regime and everybody gets eliminated. No one gets upside. And so that's my only point, is that, okay, the medallion owners paid 100,000 plus. I have some exposure to medallions via Marblegate stock, by, not financial advice. So it's not like I'm completely one-sided on this either. But the last, like, medallion owners and TLC plate owners and green cab holders, they cannot break out in civil war at this moment. This would be the exact wrong moment to do that. Do you get that point?
Let me qualify what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is the medallions are already paid for, or being paid for in some cases. The other cars, all of these plate cars and whatever they are, okay, they're sneaking in and taking the business from downtown also. They've been doing that for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Okay, what has to be done is it has to be calculated how many cars do we need in 4 boroughs of New York. Well, Staten Island is a different borough. That's a different case. Okay, but in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx, okay, how many cars are needed? Okay, and those that, and once they come to that conclusion, say 200,000. Okay, I mean, I don't know what the number is, but we just pick around.
That's double what we have now, Abe, and we have too many cars
Okay,
now.
100,000. I'm just saying you got to figure out what the number
many.
is.
We have 115,000 currently licensed vehicles now.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
But I agree. I agree with
finish.
this.
I'm getting
Oh,
cut
okay.
off.
Got it,
Wait
got
a
it,
minute.
got it, got it,
Okay.
got it.
I'm
Yeah,
not
but
saying.
Abe, that's the one question they never want to answer. The TLC, Transportation Committee, whatever, they turn themselves
Well, they got
inside out.
to answer. They don't want to answer, then get
They
rid of them.
never,
Okay.
ever,
Maybe
ever
the
want to
next
deal with
mayor
that
of New
issue.
York, maybe the next mayor of New York could get rid of them and get some people in there that know what the hell they're doing. All right. How about all of these what can we call it? The taxi hustlers. Okay, that we were talking about. They said, well, we can't handle it. Yeah, you can't handle it. Get lost. We'll get some people that can handle it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally. So number one, I 100% agree that the TLC has to say, this is how many vehicles are needed. This percentage is medallions. These are the exclusive rights for medallions. These are, there's even the guys who have the TLC plates will agree to that, except the ones who are like in this weird kind of like unlimited plates and then it shoots them in the foot. But I don't understand how those guys even think. But the other part of AVs, and this is what very few people talk about, AVs are not only displacing taxis and for-hire vehicles, driving of cars, all cars, will be licensed in New York City. That's why I'm saying that if you think of, do you see what I'm saying? Like there's 2 million registered, regular, or 1.9 million registered regular cars in the 5 boroughs, not including the tri-state area. Those cars are actually going to fit into an AV licensing regime. So if you view it from that perspective, do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Even with the
so everybody's going to be an AV. When you're not using your personal car, you're just going to switch on the self-drive and turn it over to Waymo.
Exactly. So that will be licensed. So right now, the medallion owners, and they're even if you said medallions and TLC plates 115,000, like you said, Carolyn, and when all the medallions are, it's like 120,000. They're still going to issue probably another 200,000 or 300,000 licenses because all regular cars will be displaced.
That's crazy. I think that they should make a rule that the companies who do the AVs have to own the goddamn cars. That would solve a lot of problems right there.
But with Tesla, with the Tesla model, and I think that's the correct model, Musk calls this the Tesla network, where the people who own it. That's why I wrote an article.
Yes.
Like, they flip on the F. Like there's 6,000 Model Ys right now in New York City.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not using my vacuum cleaner right now. I could be renting it out to 88 other apartments in my building, couldn't I?
Yeah, you could be a billionaire, right?
Right. Yeah.
Vacuum,
I really don't like this new model of business that has very little stake in the business.
But
all the risk is always on the drivers.
Well, I completely agree. If the driver simply owns a license, that's not a lot of risk, if you think about it, right? That's like
I'm saying the company doesn't take on much risk because they don't do anything except coordinate the trips. All the rest of the risk is on somebody else.
Well, I understand what you're saying with that, but I think in this future of AVs, I would put it this way: a taxi driver, there's more than and this kind of can transition to the mayoral election too, if you want to. But the TLC industry, if you viewed it as an employer in New York City, this is a top 5, top 10 employer in the city. You think 100,000 plus people are going to get fired and take that lying down? There's no way. There's no way that's going to happen. And so then you have to say, well, how do you compensate them? How do you facilitate this? And my prediction is they're not going to have an option. They're going to have to say that, okay, a robot's replacing you, but you have the robot, you have the permit that the robot needs or the corporation needs.
Well, how about this idea? How about this idea that they let driverless cars be in bunches, owned by garages, okay?
But why do they have to be owned by
No, no,
garage?
no, wait a minute. And then have a number of cars that are for drivers. That in other words, have both. Okay, let the drivers that want to drive, and the fleet people have 200
There
cars.
were in the ultimate iteration of autonomous vehicles, when AVs are safer than human drivers, this hybrid model will only last for, it's like a very transitionary period, I don't know, 5-10 years. But when AVs are just fundamentally safer than human drivers, mark my words, I don't know when this will happen, human driving will not be allowed in almost all circumstances.
Well, let's see what happens. All right, I think that there's room for everyone, but the biggest problem is how many cars do we need?
That is the biggest problem, but we have to. My point is that the industry needs to be. They can agree on a few things. One is there needs to be a limited supply of vehicles. I think most people in the industry can agree to that, even for the current drivers, because they're drivers. Why did lockouts happen, right? So there needs to be a supply cap, right? The second thing is that for everybody's future, the permit that they own somehow, some way should accrue rights in an AV world. They got to be grandfathered in, and they need to lobby for that now. If they lobby for that 5 years from now, it's going to be too late. That you know what I'm saying? Like when
look. The main thing is find out how many cars you need and limit it to that.
But we all know the answer.
Whether you have a driver in it or whether it's driving itself, whatever, it has to be able to make money.
But you don't. But Abe and Carolyn and Nancy, we all know the answer to how many cars are needed. The number of
but
cars.
the Taxi and Limousine Commission and New York City government does not want to know the answer. And as a matter of fact, when James Parrott, the economist from the New School, was employed more than once by TLC to analyze driver income and how bad it was and what should be done about it, he was told, do not consider limiting the number of cars.
And
that was the parameters
who said that?
within which he was allowed to do his research. So what does that tell you? TLC would have to do a 180, and maybe they will.
What tells me is whoever's running the city and not knowing what's right should be gone. It should be out of business. Should be.
So that's a perfect transition into this political election that we.
Okay,
Well, you better start lobbying Zohan Mamdani because he's going to be the next mayor.
Well, don't say that because I'm not voting for him, even though I'm in Florida. Okay.
Well, you've been an early supporter of Sliwa. I'll give you that.
Look, I want Sliwa, and I'm going to tell you why. And it has nothing to do with the taxis, okay? I wrote him a little note, and you probably read it. I asked him what he would do about the taxis. He didn't answer. But I know one thing. There's a movie that I put up about him on the Twitter page, okay? I'm going to put it. I'll put it in the website also, okay? Curtis Sliwa is a real New Yorker, okay?
Yes, he is.
Huh?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he's a real New Yorker, and if he does nothing about the taxis, which he will do what's right. He will say, "This is right. I'm doing this." Okay, and he will go after all of the criminals that are hurting people and get rid of them. Okay, lock them up, do whatever you want with them, but he cares. He cares. The other people don't care about that stuff. Okay, I don't know what they care about. Okay, they care about their pockets and all of the ridiculous salaries that they get.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Somebody made the point that the portion of the New York City population that's sort of driving this political agenda are transients. They come to the city, they live in the East Village or wherever, Chelsea, they stay for a few years, they make money, and then they leave when it's time to have a family. They don't want to be here. They leave.
They go back to Montana.
Okay, so
Well,
40 years ago, when you walked around the East Village and you saw mostly young people, and 40 years later you walk around the East Village and you see mostly young people, guess what? It's not the same people.
No.
They come and they go. But, whatever damage they've wrought is, going to be
Carolyn,
left behind after they've left.
Carolyn, except for the 2 years I spent in the U.S. Army, okay, I gave him 65 years minus those 2, okay, and after the 65 years were up, I said bye-bye. I had enough. I'd like to come back, but I won't come back until they straighten things out. Okay.
Can I ask all three of you, all of you guys are, native New Yorkers, why do you think Mamdani is as popular as he is? I'm curious to understand it. And then I'll give my own take because I have a lot of business people calling me. Yeah.
Of younger people who are being driven into poverty. And so what he has to say is very appealing. I'll help you. I'll make your life better. I'll help you get an apartment. We'll have cheaper food for you. We'll have, daycare for your kids, because New York City is very good at manufacturing poor people. Look at what they did to Medallion owners. So they manufacture a cohort of poor people, and then they throw you a few crumbs. Oh, well, we'll have free legal aid for you, or, oh, here, take some food stamps, or, how about Section 8 housing? Let's do that for you. So then you're kind of sucked into it because now you're a poor person. So, these kids know they have no future. Very few of them have much of a future, especially with, autonomous everything, including
maybe they should get some better
all the
teachers.
professions. So, of course, he's very, and, he's personable. He's always smiling. He sounds positive. He's fast. His mother's a famous film director. I'm sure she has a hand, in some of his, social media presentations. And, according to the polls, as it stands now, he's going to win. We have Adams, who's the mayor, and Cuomo, the ex-governor. They're both running as independents. They couldn't even get the nomination for their own party, the Democratic Party. Then you have another independent, Jim Walden, who I actually like, but I don't think he has a chance, of going anywhere in this thing. And then you have Curtis, who's,
All right,
probably
Carolyn.
come in at around 35% of the vote, which is, I think, what he did last time.
Okay, that's very nice, but never say never. Okay. I think.
How about you, Nancy? Why do you think Mamdani is popular?
Oh my God. Okay. Obviously he got charisma. He's young. He's vibrant. He smiles a lot. He's a charmer. For me, I'm a native New Yorker. I don't take his charm. He's charming all these people that are, like we said, like Carolyn just said, they're transients. They're from other states. They're a younger crowd. And I feel that a lot of them are college-educated kids. And the truth has to be said. A lot of these college-educated kids, these new ones, maybe millennials and younger, they're just indoctrinated in a whole new way. And they don't know what socialism or communism is. And socialism does lead to communism. And I have a lot of friends who I grew up with whose parents escaped Cuba and Fidel Castro when he came in. And we all know how all that starts, with a lot of charm, a lot of smiles, a lot of things. I'm going to give you this for free. You're going to have this for free. And nothing is free. Nothing comes free. Everything comes at a price. And I think these people who are running after this guy, oh, Mamdani's the best, he's going to save us, he's the savior, are not in reality. They need to get smacked around to jump into reality. I've been pressed a lot and called a lot of names for calling out Mamdani, but this is what they want. And you know something, if he does become mayor, hopefully not, maybe we got another 2-3 months for people to open their eyes. It's going to be a rude awakening for New Yorkers, because I always say, be careful what you wish for. And Caroline, you do got a point there. They promise all these free things, and they keep people living in poverty and not trying to get out of it and become better, and nothing with these things. I'm going to keep your free Section A. I'm going to keep this. You're going to, and I hate that. I hate that mindset of not trying to get better, and nothing comes for free. I don't think he's a good pick for New York City mayor, and I personally feel like Curtis, he's the guy. He's the native New Yorker. I've been seeing him since I was a kid. They were already talking about the guardian angels and the subways and how they were around, and he's all over, and thinking about New Yorkers and everything that's better for us. But I don't know. This is some scary stuff. I recently joined the Walk Away crowd. Brandon Strzok, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He started the Walk Away from Communism, Socialism. They're completely against this man becoming the mayor. And I've been watching him a lot, and I went to one of his rallies. It was amazing, Union Square Park. And they were talking, not about demonizing Mamdani, but about showing to the public and to the people what the policies and what this guy wants to bring and what they really mean. And do we really want to follow this? And
I think that's really interesting. This is my 2 cents on it, because I have a lot of business people calling me like, I had a fleet owner call me literally freaking out, saying that I got to sell everything right now before he gets elected. I think, I'm definitely a moderate, and I think right now the issue with New York, the only socialism I joke with some of these guys who are definitely not in the Mamdani crowd. I said the only socialism that I have experienced has been under Mayor Adams and David Doe, when he called the industry that I function in predatory, right? That's the only socialism that I have experienced, that socialism. So I was going to write this article called Socialism versus Incompetence. And right now in New York, the issue isn't socialism, communism, capitalism, it's incompetence. That's what's going on. It's not, and I think they use these labels to distract people. I think with Mamdani, I think the reason you guys hit the nail on the head with wealth inequality and maybe some foreign policy stuff, which is not really relevant to New York, but that's why he's appealing to a young crowd. I also think he's appealing because things let's put this very simply, things aren't working for a lot of New Yorkers for various reasons. And it's because this government and these governments, outside of, honestly, you could say Mike Bloomberg was competent, they're incompetent. What are we talking about right now? The TLC needs to set a limit on cars. Everybody in the industry knows that this is the right policy. No one can do it. Look what just happened to Revel, right? Who used their political influence undoubtedly to release those plates, right? Out of business, right? That was corruption. Socialism and corruption are the same, they're kind of the same thing. Incompetence, socialism, communism. Socialism done very bad is incompetence. Capitalism done very bad is incompetence. So right now, I think as I'm looking to the future, in my personal opinion, I agree with what you guys are saying. I've seen it in other countries, this kind of promise of free everything. Now, at the same token, there's also corporate socialism, right? And
exactly. And that's one of the reasons why there are so many subsidies for people. Now, I don't want anybody to starve because they can't get food stamps, okay? Yeah. But when you give people all these, benefits, the corporations can pay them less. So it's the corporations who ultimately benefit.
So what I'm saying is that there has been a form of socialism in New York already, and it's actually been corporate socialism in many ways. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so I think the only thing I care about this election, to be frank, is very TLC specific. And what I'm gaming out is if Mamdani does win, which it appears he's winning, right? I'm not saying that is what appears to be happening. I think he would appoint a Bhairavi Desai type of commissioner. Heck, I might even think he might even appoint Bhairavi Desai as the chair if she'll take it. And what's funny is if you actually game it out, what we're talking about, that, you know, TLC plates and, you know, medallions being AV licenses, I believe that he would probably be more in favor of that versus a Waymo bribing someone, or not bribing, lobbying someone to completely eliminate this, you know, the working people in the TLC industry and the working businesses in the TLC industry. So my only point is that I think this election is a big deal for business people in New York who operate in the TLC industry, very specifically.
You better hook yourself up with a Marxist quick. Barry decides stock just went up if she was a stock, because she might have an in.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen.
no, but I mean, just to conclude, and I know we got to wrap up. I guess my only point is that a lot of people forget whoever wins the election, he's going to appoint a new TLC commissioner. And everything we just spoke about in this podcast.
Well, we're talking to our next mayor.
Okay. No, I'm not. I would never run for mayor because they'd probably kill me.
No, I'm
before
just saying.
yeah.
What I'm saying is that what we're recording now, we can play it to our next mayor. Okay, and I just want to ask you one thing: do you pay your taxes every year? Yes.
Do I pay? Yes,
Yes.
I pay my taxes. Yeah.
Do you
Yes.
pay into Social Security?
Yes.
That's socialism.
That's a form of socialism, correct? But there's like pure laissez-faire capitalism and pure socialism are horrible. But what the American system is like this hybrid version of capitalism for sure. And I'm more attuned to that. Hell, I'm an entrepreneur. I invest, like, if I'm the #1 poster child of capitalism.
You know,
But
I don't think the problem is socialism, communism, capitalism, whatever. The problem is helping everybody and making sure everybody could get the things they need.
That's exactly right. And the only just the point I want to make is for those, because a lot of people listen to this podcast are TLC drivers and taxi drivers, right? The election, and also fleet owners, maybe. Whoever is the next mayor is going to fundamentally impact all of our lives because he controls the Taxi and Limousine Commission. And it'd be nice to hear these mayor, whether it's Cuomo, whether it's Adams, whether it's Mamdani, whether it's Sliwa. I'm still confused what their stance on AVs is. No one has made any statement. They need to say something.
They're afraid. I think, look, I'm going to say one more thing and then we're going to end this, okay? This should be a debate between Curtis Sliwa and Mamdani. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Right, okay. They should have a couple of debates and let people know what they're for and what they will do. All right? And I'm challenging them both to do that. All right? I haven't heard about it, these things going to happen, but they should. They have time and people will listen, and New Yorkers are smart, okay? The real New Yorkers, they're smart, okay? And they will do what's right.
Yeah, that's right, Abe. And that's the main point. Like with AVs in our industry, I'm not clear where anybody stands. Any of these mayoral, including Mamdani. I have no idea where these people stand on AVs.
Well, we want to know. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being on the NYC Taxi News podcast. And I want to thank all of our sponsors, and I want to thank the people listening, because we really need you and we really love you.